Episode 95. The Bottled Water Industry. Selling us something we already own? Welcome back to the Conspiracy Theory Analyst. I'm Robin. Water is the most fundamental resource on Earth. It covers 70% of the planet's surface. It falls from the sky. It runs through rivers and fills aquifers beneath our feet. Access to clean drinking water has been declared a universal human right by the United Nations. Without it, a human being dies in 3 days. And yet, the bottled water industry is worth $312 billion annually. Major corporations extract hundreds of billions of liters from springs, aquifers, and municipal supplies every year, often paying almost nothing for the water itself, and sell it back to us at markups that can reach thousands of %. In Spain's Lecrin Valley, residents watch trucks carry away their local spring water day and night, while their own wells run dry. In Florida, water levels in the Santa Fe River Basin have dropped so significantly that officials describe the area as in recovery, even as bottling operations continued to increase extraction. In California's San Bernardino Mountains, legal battles over water rights are ongoing while downstream communities face shortages. Tonight we examine whether the bottled water industry represents a legitimate business, an environmental scandal, or something more deliberate: the slow privatization of a resource that should belong to everyone. Detailed explanation: the bottled water industry did not begin as a conspiracy. It began as a convenience product and a genuine public health response in places where tap water was unreliable or unsafe. In parts of the world with inadequate water infrastructure, bottled water provides essential access. That context matters. What has changed is scale. The industry now extracts approximately 408 billion liters annually, with that figure projected to grow. Major corporations, Nestlé's water brands, now operating under Blue Triton brands and other subsidiaries, PepsiCo's Aquafina, Coca-Cola's Dasani, Danone's Evian, control vast networks of springs and aquifers. They extract water that in most cases belongs, in the legal and moral sense, to the public commons, under permits that typically charge only token fees. Nestlé Mexico reportedly paid the equivalent of $127 per year for water extraction rights, while making nearly 500 times that amount from the bottled product. In England and Wales, water privatization in 1989 transferred the public water supply to private companies. In the 34 years since, those companies have accumulated a debt pile of £73 billion, while paying out £88.4 billion in dividends. In 2025, over 124,000 hours of sewage were discharged into England's bathing waters. In 2026, the figure in just the early months of the year exceeded 46,000 hours. These are not conspiracy claims. They are documented regulatory filings and environmental monitoring data. Core elements of the concern: the first element is the extraction model. The fundamental business model of bottled water involves taking a common resource, water that falls from the sky, and accumulates in shared aquifers and rivers at minimal or zero cost, processing it, placing it in a plastic bottle, and selling it for between 500 and 2,000 times the cost of tap water. The environmental cost of producing 1 liter of bottled water, through extraction, purification, plastic production, filling, and transportation, requires up to 4 liters of water and generates approximately 202 grams of CO2. A liter of tap water generates 0.4 grams. The second element is the microplastic contamination scandal. In August 2025, French investigators found record levels of microplastic contamination in Nestlé's Contrax and Hipar bottled waters, up to 1.3 million times higher than in rivers and lakes, and between 5 and 3,000 times above the global groundwater average. A French Senate report in May 2025 accused the Macron government of knowingly concealing Nestlé's illegal practices since 2021. French prosecutors are investigating potential fraud related to mislabeled water products and illegal waste dumping near bottling facilities. The third element is the privatization of public infrastructure. Across the United States, approximately a dozen states have passed legislation to promote the sale of public water and wastewater utilities to private companies. Advocates argue private investment can fund infrastructure upgrades, critics argue that essential services cannot be safely entrusted to profit-driven entities with no accountability to the public. The English experience, £88 billion in dividends alongside £73 billion in debt and routine sewage discharge, is cited as the most visible example of what privatization produces. The fourth element is the marketing of tap water. In many developed countries, bottled water is chemically indistinguishable from, or in some cases inferior to, municipal tap water. Pepsi's Aquafina and Coca-Cola's Dasani are both processed municipal water, tap water, filtered and bottled. The premium charge for this product is sustained almost entirely by marketing that associates bottled water with purity, health, and status. The environmental and financial cost of this marketing achievement falls on individual consumers and on the planet's plastic waste systems. Evidence for and against the evidence for the exploitative practices of the bottled water industry is substantial, documented, and increasing. The French microplastic findings are peer-reviewed and confirmed. The English water company dividend and debt figures come from regulatory filings. The extraction fee disparities are documented in water rights records. The environmental cost calculations come from independent life cycle analysis research. These are not theories. The evidence against a coordinated conspiracy that the industry deliberately schemes to deprive people of access to public water is harder to establish. The industry operates within legal frameworks it has lobbied to maintain, which is standard corporate behavior rather than unique conspiracy. The degradation of public water infrastructure in many places is real, but attributable to decades of underinvestment as much as to active sabotage. What the bottled water industry has done is identify illegal arbitrage, taking a common resource at near zero cost and selling it at enormous markup, and defend that arbitrage through lobbying, marketing, and political relationships. Whether that constitutes conspiracy or simply capitalism operating as designed is partly a philosophical question. Arguments in favor of concerned critics argue that water is categorically different from other commodities. The UN has declared it a human right. It cannot be substituted. Its privatization, in the form of extraction permits, infrastructure sale, or bottled water marketing, transfers of public commons into private profit in ways that directly harm communities whose wells run dry, rivers whose levels drop, and oceans filling with plastic. They also argue that the French microplastic scandal demonstrates that the industry is willing to sell contaminated water, and that governments are willing to conceal that contamination in order to protect corporate interests. If true, that is not a market failure. It is a deliberate choice. Arguments against the industry argues that it operates within legally granted permits, that bottled water provides essential access in areas with poor tap water infrastructure, and that consumer choice, rather than corporate conspiracy, drives the market. They note that in countries with excellent tap water, consumers choose to purchase bottled water for reasons of taste, convenience, and habit, not because they have been deceived about their alternatives. They also note that the solution to water privatization concerns lies in legislation and regulatory reform rather than in conspiracy framing, and that conflating a systemic policy failure with deliberate plot makes the policy solution harder to achieve. Public opinion and broader impact. The bottled water industry faces growing pressure in 2025 and 2026. The French microplastic scandal has been widely reported. The English sewage crisis has driven sustained public anger. The Blue Community Movement, committed to water as a public right, has reached 210 communities, encompassing 25 million people. Cities across Europe are investing in public drinking fountains as an alternative to plastic bottles. San Francisco banned the sale of plastic water bottles at public events years ago. The trajectory is toward greater accountability, but slowly, and against an industry with enormous financial and political resources. Conclusion: is the bottled water industry selling us something we already own? In the most literal sense, yes. Water extracted from public aquifers under permit, processed and sold at thousands of times its cost, belongs in some fundamental sense to everyone. The industry has successfully privatized a common resource and sold it back at profit while externalizing environmental costs onto the planet. Whether this constitutes conspiracy depends on how you define the word. The practice is legal. The lobbying is disclosed. The extraction is permitted. What is not transparent is the microplastic contamination, the government cover-ups, and the full environmental accounting of an industry that produces 1 liter of product from 4 liters of water. For believers in the conspiracy framing, water privatization is the most fundamental corporate theft of a common resource in human history. For defenders of the industry, it is a legal market operating within a regulatory framework that governments have chosen to create. What is certain is this: water falls freely from the sky. By the time it reaches the bottle in your hand, someone has made a great deal of money from it. This is the Conspiracy Theory Analyst. I'm Robin. If tonight's episode made you think, please rate and follow on Spotify. Tomorrow on the Conspiracy Theory Analyst, quantum computing. The secret breakthrough governments are hiding. That's next.